Imagine a 99-year-old man, alone in the world. No children, no grandchildren, a fortune built with sweat over almost a century. Everyone expected the money to stay in the family, but what he did, no one could have imagined. It was simply unbelievable. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, until an unexpected situation changed absolutely everything. Get ready. Just when you think you understand the story, that's when everything changes. Once upon a time, in a small town in the countryside, there was a man named Antonio Silva. At 99 years old, he still walked slowly through the garden of the old mansion he himself had built brick by brick. His hair was white as cotton, his eyes tired, but full of a wisdom that only time teaches. Antonio never had children. His wife, Donna Maria, passed away more than 40 years ago, and fate gave them no blood heirs. He was a simple man, despite his wealth. He made his fortune honestly, planting coffee, investing patiently, and helping those in need without fanfare. The people of the town respected him. The children called him Grandpa Tonio when he passed by, but in the distant family, his great-nephews and great-nieces saw him only as a rich old man who would one day die and leave everything to them. They hardly ever visited him. They only called at Christmas or when they needed to borrow money. Antonio knew this. He observed in silence. One afternoon, sitting on the porch, he looked at the horizon and murmured, "Money doesn't buy love, but it can give hope to those who have never had any." He smiled to himself, as if keeping a secret, and it was at that moment that everything began to change, because Antonio had already made a silent decision that would forever shake the hearts of his distant family. Antonio got up with difficulty and walked to the old office, a place where few were allowed to enter. He opened a forgotten drawer and took out a dusty folder, kept for many years. His eyes calmly scanned each page, as if revisiting his entire life. There were records, decisions, and memories that no one else knew. He took a deep breath, as if finally accepting that the time to act had come. He discreetly called someone he trusted, without his relatives knowing. The conversation was long, serious, and full of meaning. Each word spoken carried the weight of a lifetime of work and silence. Before concluding, he made only one simple but firm request. "I want everything to be done the right way, at the right time." In the following days, his routine continued seemingly the same, without raising suspicions. His relatives continued to believe that their future was already secured. But behind that tranquility, something had already been set in motion, and when the time came, no one would be prepared for what was to come. His closest relatives were three. His nephew Roberto, ambitious and cold, who lived dreaming of luxury cars. His great-niece Carla, who complained about the hard life and saw the inheritance as salvation. And his distant cousin Marcos, who feigned concern but only thought about the money. They would meet in secret and say, "When the old man dies, we'll divide everything. After all, we're his family." But Antonio wasn't a fool. He saw the forced visits, the fake smiles, the veiled questions about health and wills. One day, Roberto showed up at the mansion with a lawyer. "Uncle, it's good to think about the future. You need someone to take care of the assets." Antonio just looked at him and calmly replied, "I already have someone who takes care of me, and of my future too." The relatives started to pressure him. They called every day. They spoke ill of him behind his back. Carla cried on the phone, "I'm the only one who cares, Uncle. The others only want the money." The injustice grew. Antonio, who had given jobs to so many in the city, who had helped build the school and the health center, was now treated like a walking safe. His heart ached. "They don't see me. They only see the zeros in the bank account." The loneliness weighed more heavily than ever. And then something worse happened. Antonio's fragile health began to deteriorate rapidly, bringing to light all the greed his relatives had hidden. Nights became long and silent, interrupted only by coughs and tired sighs. Antonio could no longer walk through the garden as before. The mansion, once full of memories, now seemed cold and empty. Relatives began to appear more frequently, but not out of concern. They observed every movement, every sign of weakness. They spoke in hushed voices in the hallways, as if they were already expecting the end. Roberto began to give orders to the servants, as if he were the new owner of the house. Carla rummaged through old papers, trying to find something that would guarantee her share. Marcos made constant calls, always talking about resolving everything quickly. So Antonio noticed everything, even in silence. Sometimes, he pretended to sleep just to avoid hearing those cold conversations. His heart ached, not because of the illness, but because of the disappointment. He never imagined he would be treated like this at the end of his life. Even weak, his mind was still clear and his decisions firm. And deep down, he knew the worst was yet to come. His father, Antonio, fell ill. A severe case of pneumonia left him bedridden for weeks. The doctor said that, at 99 years old, anything could be the end. Relatives arrived running, not to care for him, but to keep watch. Roberto settled into the mansion as if he already owned it. Carla rummaged through drawers looking for documents. Marco spoke to the lawyer on the phone in the next room. They argued openly in the kitchen. If he dies today, we divide it into 3 equal parts. No charity. Antonio, weak in bed, heard everything through the half-open door. Each word was a stab in the chest. He, who had worked his whole life with dignity, was now treated as a burden. His health worsened. He could barely speak. It seemed there was no way out. The family's greed had won. The 99-year-old millionaire was alone, surrounded by wolves disguised as relatives. He closed his eyes and thought, "Lord, if it's my time, may my money at least serve a good purpose." The situation seemed hopeless. But fate, as always, held a surprise. One rainy morning, a completely unexpected person crossed the threshold of that mansion and brought a light that Antonio no longer expected. The door opened slowly, and the sound of rain echoed through the mansion's corridors. A young woman entered with timid steps, carrying a small work bag. Her gaze was serene, but carried a rare The relatives observed her with suspicion, as if her presence were a nuisance. "Who are you?" asked Roberto, irritated. She calmly replied, "I am the nurse. I was called to take care of Mr. Antonio." Without waiting for approval, she went to the room. Upon entering, she found the old man lying down, frail, but still conscious. She approached slowly, adjusted the pillow, and spoke softly. "I am here to help you." Antonio opened his eyes with difficulty, and, for the first time in days, saw no sign. In the days that followed, something began to change within that house. Her presence brought a different kind of silence, lighter, more human, and, without even realizing it, that young woman had just become the most important piece of a story that would still surprise everyone. One rainy morning, a young nurse named Isabel arrived to care for Sue Antonio. She worked at the small orphanage in the city and had been called in as a temporary caregiver. Isabella, sweet, patient, and had a sparkle in her eyes that Antonio hadn't seen in years. While changing the medicines and adjusting the pillows, she told stories about the children at the orphanage. There's Lucas, 7 years old, who dreams of being a doctor. Little Sophia, who draws little houses and says that one day she'll have a family. Antonio listened in silence. For the first time in months, he truly smiled. Isabel didn't know about his fortune. She treated him with genuine affection, as if he were her own grandfather. She read the Bible to him at night and prayed softly. Gradually, Antonio's health improved. It wasn't a medical miracle. It was the human warmth he lacked. He began to ask more about the orphanage. "How many children have no one, Isabel?" She answered with a choked voice. "Many, Mr. Antonio. Many who just need a chance." For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. And he decided it was time to act. Without anyone suspecting, he called his trusted lawyer and began to write a new destiny for all his fortune. That same week, The office reopened after a long time. The curtains were drawn, and the light entered, illuminating old papers and forgotten decisions. Mr. Antonio, still weak, sat with effort at the desk where he had built his story. The lawyer arrived silently, understanding the importance of that moment. Every word spoken there wasn't just about money. It was about purpose. Antonio asked that everything be clearly recorded, leaving no room for doubt. He mentioned the orphanage, the children, the dreams he heard through Isabel. He spoke of hope, something he himself had recovered. Meanwhile, on the other side of the house, the relatives continued making plans. They laughed, discussed, and imagined how they would spend the inheritance. None of them suspected what was being decided at that moment. At the end of the conversation, Antonio signed the documents with trembling but sure hands. It was as if he were finally closing a cycle of an entire life. Before putting the papers away, he looked out the window and smiled peacefully, because, for the first time, he was certain that everything he had built would make sense, even after his departure. On a sunny day, when he could finally sit up in bed, Antonio called his trusted lawyer, Dr. Fernando, who was a longtime friend. The relatives were in the next room, anxiously waiting for the moment. But Antonio dictated a new will. He left his entire fortune, houses, land, bank accounts, everything to the Snow Jose orphanage. The money would be used to renovate the building, hire teachers and doctors, and ensure that no child would go hungry or cold. Furthermore, he created a foundation bearing his name to help other orphanages in the country. When the lawyer left, Antonio called Isabel and said in a firm voice, "You are the daughter life didn't give me. Take care of the children as you took care of me." Isabel wept with emotion. The relatives didn't know yet. They laughed in the living room, making plans with the money they thought was theirs. But fate was about to turn the tables. 2 days later, Seu Antonio passed away peacefully, and the moment arrived that would forever change what everyone expected to receive. The news of his death spread quickly through the city. The relatives, despite their apparent sadness, could barely hide their anxiety. All they awaited now is the reading of the will. In the mansion, the atmosphere was heavy, but filled with expectation. Roberto paced back and forth, impatient. Carla tried to hide her nervousness, but her eyes betrayed her anxiety. Marcos kept his phone in hand, ready for any decision. Neither of them spoke of missing each other, only of what was to come next. Meanwhile, Isabel remained silent, her heart heavy. She wasn't thinking about money, only about how much she would miss that man. The lawyer scheduled a meeting for the next day in his office at the mansion itself. It would be there that everything would be revealed. That night, each slept with different expectations. Some dreamed of wealth, others of memories, but no one was prepared for what was really about to happen. 2 days later, Seu Antonio passed away, peacefully sleeping with a slight smile on his lips. The wake was simple, as he had wished. Many city residents attended. The children from the orphanage sang a song he had requested. When the lawyer read the will in the mansion's living room, the silence was sepulchral. Roberto turned white. Carla started shouting, "This is absurd. It was Tenile. Let's cancel it." Marcos slammed his fist on the table. "He can't do this. We're family." Anger consumed them. They felt betrayed, robbed. Isabel was there, quiet, with tears in her eyes. But then came the revelation that changed everything. Fernando handed over a handwritten letter from Antonio, written weeks before. "Dear nephews, I loved you as much as I could. But love isn't measured in inheritance. You visited me when you needed money, not when I needed company. The children at the orphanage gave me sincere smiles without asking for anything in return. My money won't buy cars or parties. It will buy dreams, food, books, and hope. Forgive me if I disappointed you, but I couldn't die knowing that my life's work would feed greed. May God bless you. May you learn that true wealth is in the heart." The room fell silent. Carla began to cry for real for the first time. Roberto lowered his head, ashamed. Anger gave way, to painful reflection. And it was from this reflection that, over time, an unexpected transformation was born. The following days were marked by a different silence, heavier and more reflective. Roberto avoided looking anyone in the eye, as if carrying a weight difficult to hide. Carla spent sleepless nights, remembering the words of the letter. Marcos, once so confident, no longer had ready answers. For the first time, neither of them spoke about money. Something inside them had truly been shaken. Moved by a feeling they couldn't explain, they decided to visit the orphanage. There, they found children smiling at simple things, living with a joy that didn't depend on wealth. Every look, every gesture seemed to echo the words of Suantanio. And at that moment, they began to understand that the greatest inheritance they received was not in money, but in the lesson they would never forget. Months later, the Esojosa orphanage was renovated. The children now had cozy rooms, a new library, medical care, and, above all, hope. Isabel became the director and dedicated her life to caring for those little ones. As Antonio had asked, the relatives gradually changed. Roberto began to visit the orphanage voluntarily. Carla started helping with donations. They understood, too late, what the old millionaire tried to teach. Suantanio, the 99-year-old man without biological children, gained dozens of grandchildren he never met, but who carry his legacy in their smiles every day. Suantanio's name began to be remembered fondly throughout the city. A simple plaque was placed at the entrance of the orphanage in his honor. The children asked who he was and heard stories of generosity and love. Isabel made a point of keeping alive every lesson he left behind. The laughter that now echoed through the hallways was proof that it was all worthwhile. Roberto, Carla, and Marcos continued to frequent the place, not out of obligation, but by choice. They learned, little by little, to give without expecting anything in return. The old mansion was empty, but his true legacy was more alive than ever, because, in the end, Suantanio was never alone. He just didn't yet know how many hearts he would reach. The true inheritance is not what we leave in money. It's what we leave in people's hearts. Wealth without generosity is just an empty number. Love, kindness, and compassion, these things never die. Do you believe that destiny always balances things out? Have you ever lived or seen a story where money revealed people's true character? If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a message of hope today, and subscribe to the channel. But only if this story spoke to your soul. Leave your like and we'll see you in the next story that can change the way you see life.